Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. So as I was growing up, kind of born into a very typical Sikh Punjabi home, and didn't have much knowledge of Sikhi as I was growing up. And household was very typical Punjabi household. Grew up with father working very hard, and then having a nice binge drink on the weekend. And then to us that was the norm, and that's just how everybody done it. And so I followed those footsteps, to be honest. And at a very, very early age, very young age, at the age of about 12, started to smoke cigarettes. By the age of about 13, drinking alcohol. 14, quite a heavy user of cannabis, and then there was a good few years of where my life was actually just full of, I didn't know how it felt to be sober. And even when I'd be at school, I'd be sitting in lessons and I'd be intoxicated of smoking cannabis. And but there was this, so a lot of people get that confused for somebody being a bad person, but at the same time it was very strange where I always had this very caring side as such, and tried to look out for other people even though my life was like that. And then at the same time, so it's just having bad habits, and we confuse it for it being a bad person. And then it was when things got really bad, when I was about 16, and then it was a lot of difficulties at home with my sister as well. And then somebody kind of just turned up on our doorstep like an angel to us, and said, look, you guys are in a bit of a mess, and said to my father, how about if I take you to a Gurdwara to meet a few Gurmukhs, to meet a Sant. And my father at that point, even though he didn't believe in going to any Gurmukh Sants or anything of as such, very normal typical drinking background, but he just felt so failed, as in the way I had turned out and stuff, and such a heavy drinker at a young age. And he thought, why not? Let's give it a shot. But for me, life at that point, I wasn't sure about anything. I doubted even if there was an existence of God. And to me, it was like you die and it's just a black hole and there's nothing. So for the first time in my life, when we did go to the Gurdwara Sahib by somebody that came to rescue us, a cousin of mine, and it was the first time we was going to go in to see whatever people would like to feel comfortable calling this person a Gurmukh, a Sant, a Guru da Pyara, a Gursikh. And but it was the first time in my life where I felt a sense of fear, and where before that I would never fear anyone or anything as such. But the first time, before even entering this room, the aura was so immense of this Gurmukh that I could feel it outside. And when you're going in front of the mirror of truth, it was like all my negativity inside, everything that I got up to, it felt as if I could see right in front of me, and I was literally shaking from inside. And I was like, whoa, what's happening to me? I've never felt anything. I had never felt anything of that extent, physically or mentally, you could say, other than from intoxications. So I was like, how's it possible to feel like this? I've not smoked a spliff. I've not had a shot. What's happening to me? And then realizing it's like being in front of the presence of somebody with so much power, of Naam. And then as soon as we sat down, so I'm already feeling that, but as soon as we sat down, Mahaprabhu, first question he asked my dad was, Dasoji. And my father's turned around and said, my kids are kind of off the rails. And nobody, we've not met him before, nobody's told him about us. And then the first thing the Mahaprabhu turned around and said to my father was, he goes, Tusi sahi raste hai ji? He goes, are you on the right path? As soon as he questioned that to my dad put his head down. And then without us telling him what the situation was, the Mahaprabhu turned around and said, if you're going to drink, your kids are going to follow. Your kids are going to drink too. What do you expect? And that was my first experience of somebody knowing your inner, what's inside of you, and without you even talking to them, and something beyond this world. That's when I started to think, okay, there's something beyond this physical world. There's a bit more out there. So that was my first, like that's my introduction to kind of to Sikhi, and it came through dukh, came through pain. And as Maharaji says, dukh daru sukh rog paya, but that dukh became our medicine. So, but again, you could call it, I came into Sikhi, started learning Gurmukhi, started learning a lot, started spending a lot of time at the Gurdwara Sahib, but still, I didn't find the right Sangat as such. And Maharaji says in Gurbani, Sangat ka gun bahut adkai, that the effect of Sangat is very great. And so even I thought I could still associate with the same friends I had, I could still be amongst certain people and I wouldn't be affected, but I was very wrong. So for that reason, I had a roller coaster of a life for 10 years and trying to be in Sikhi, but just kept falling off that boat. And I'd last about a year, then drink again, and then I'd last about 2 years, and that was due to Sangat. So, and then it wasn't till actually I got married, which was about 7 years ago, 2007, I think. So it wasn't actually until then, and until like I had this urge inside of me to learn the meanings of Gurbani. Because you know when like you feel that you've been conned, the world tells you that happiness comes from materialistic things. I got to marry the girl I wanted to marry, that I'd been with for 10 years, that I battled to be with because of religion difference. I had the dream car, I had your convertible Audi sports car. My business was running well, had a nice house, and then I was thinking, all right, I've been conned. Where's the happiness? Like, where's that contentment, that inner feeling of peace? You know, the household is still a mess. And at this point, me and my wife actually we took Amrit together when we got married, but still there was a lot of the typical mother-in-law and daughter-in-law not getting on. And I'm thinking, where is it? Where's the sukh? And that's when I had this urge to learn what Gurbani is actually saying to me. And it kind of all fits in, because that was then, I think, 2007, 2008. But a Mahaprabhu who taught me how to learn Gurmukhi, he did bachan. He said to me in year 2000 that a time will come that I'll be doing Katha. And when that was so random at the time he said it, because I had no knowledge of Gurbani whatsoever. But again, at the same time in year 2000, I did an ardas in India, that Maharaji, like, if there's anything you could bless me with, I just want a little understanding of Gurbani. So it wasn't until 8 years later when I had this urge to understand what Japji Sahib meant, and that's kind of when the journey started. So at that point, when I decided to, okay, I want to understand what Japji Sahib means, so I took that step to kind of went online, didn't have a clue where to start, how to go about this. And this is like before smartphones came about and stuff. I came across some common English translation, read through that. Still wasn't, I was thought, all right, this is great. It felt good, but I was like, I want more. And for the first time in my life, it was like where everything else I had around me, like I loved food. I'd be like a restaurant king, and I did it for years, very overweight. And then, but these things, like the buzz always went down, the experience, the ras, that pleasure, it was always decreasing. But when I started reading those translations, it felt as if I wanted more, but at the same time the pleasure and the experience, that happiness was increasing. But everything materialistic in this world, the pleasure of it goes down. And in Gurbani it says that Re man aisi hasyo preet kar jaisi machli neer jio adko to sukh kono man tan sant sarira. Maharaji says that like a fish diving into that water, that fish will never say, oh, it's enough, you know, and I don't want any more. But the fish, Maharaji says, Guru Nanak Dev Ji says, as it goes deeper, the bliss is just increasing. It's getting more and more peace out of it. And it felt like that wait there, this is the opposite to everything I experience in the world. This is increasing, these pieces. So from there, I went on to listening to Katha, literally became like taking over my life day and night. And at that point where like whether I was going to work in the van, I had my own business, even then I was listening to Qatar all the time. At home I'd fall asleep listening to Qatar till 1 o'clock at night. And then I remember one episode that sticks out, and then we went to a wedding function, me and my wife did, and I remember going into this environment where this loud music playing with all these songs that are very contradictory, too Sikhi to the message of Guru Nanak, playing loud, and there's like tables full of meat, table full of alcohol, people dancing. And I remember being there, but because my whole life was becoming just putting Gurbani inside, it felt so odd. And I thought, what's going on? It felt like a dream. It literally felt like you see in the movies when everything slows down. It felt like everything had slowed down, and I couldn't make out anything anymore. And it just felt like a big, like it was like a big mist. And I remember people pulling me and saying, "Come and dance," and it just felt like I was in hell. And I thought, Maharaji, this is Nark. And I just turned around to my wife and I said, I think I'm done. I said, I don't think I can do this again. And she, for some reason, the kirpa happened. She just looked at my face and she said, okay. And that was it. And that was like 6 years ago, I think, more than 6 years ago, and never looked back. I never had to experience and go into that type of environment again. But that urge for Gurbani then increased, then learning more detailed translations of Japji Sahib, turning to Professor Saib Singh, then looking into deeper steeks of Taksal, of Mir Pandar. And with Maharaj's Kirpa, and the way Parchar came about was amazing as well. We moved to our new house, and what we decided what to do was, me and Singani, was to say, we thought we'd do a Saj Bhat, but we want to kind of do it ourselves. So Maharaj came to the house, and Maharaj stayed at our house for 10 days, and we did Saj Bhat ourselves. So we'd have it would be like a darbar downstairs. We'd have Maharaj coming downstairs on Martavilla. We'll do Bhat for about 5 hours, and then we'd take Maharaj up in the day, and Maharaj come back down for the evening darbar. We'll have Rairas, Kirtan, doing Bhat, and that whole atmosphere and experience of Maharaj being there, it just felt amazing, like a miracle was taking place. And I just remember one of my uncles saying to me, "Oh, can you teach my 2 kids to kind of better their pronunciation in Bhat and in Gurbani?" I said, I'm not the best myself. I said, but I can give it a shot. So it was just started off with 2 kids coming to the house every week. I'd go and pick them up and just telling them a bit of meaning, bit of the translation and pronunciation. And with Guru Sahib's Kirpa, it was like I didn't even have to go out there to try and do Parchar, but it came to our house. People started finding out we're doing this, and it started growing. With Maharaj's Kirpa, it grew to a weekly session at home every Fridays with about 25 to 30 people, which we couldn't even fit in our room anymore. And it was the most happening night out of the week. Everybody would look forward to. It became from teaching Santhya to it'd be Kirtan, doing Rairas collectively together, Sangat, and then I'd started making presentations of Japji Sahib on PowerPoint. I'd never even used PowerPoint before because I was a plumber by trade. I didn't even know how to use these things, but I learned how to use PowerPoint just doing Japji Sahib presentations. I was learning alongside myself. And I'd learn in the week that body and then make a presentation, and it was a buzzing night. And my wife would make different dishes, different desserts, just like Bhagat Fariji's mother would pull him in with the sugar, and pulling so much sangat in, and it was just like amazing. So that's how I started Parchar, just from home, teaching 2 kids where we don't even know how it grew, and it got to then my confidence building up and then presenting. So from that, what started happening was I was getting so engrossed in reading translations and history that it started affecting my business. So because I had no one looking over me as a boss because I ran my own business, so I would just sit at home in the morning. I'd finish Nityanem, but then start just reading translations of the Nityanem, and I'd have appointments booked, And next thing I know, I'd look at the time and it's like 11 or 12 o'clock. Like 12 o'clock, it'll be lunchtime. And it got to the point where I was listening to Qatan, learning, memorizing shabads. I'd go and I'd go to the house, to the appointments that I've made, but I wouldn't make it inside because I'd be so engrossed in the shabad, and then sometimes I'd just end up turning back. Or like I'd started then learning, memorizing shabads whilst I was fitting boiler systems, and my mind was just I did it for 10 years, 11 years the trade, but then my mind was just wasn't in it anymore. And it got to the point from being doing very well financially to getting to a point where we had to actually consider maybe selling our house. And my wife was like, "Are you crazy? Like, what are you doing?" So, and I just said, I used to keep saying to her, I used to say, "Well, I'm going to spread the word. Everything I'm learning, I've got to go out there and I've got to spread this." And she used to laugh. She says, "Look, nobody knows you. Get back to work. Who are you going to go and tell all this to?" And I'd be like, no, I'm going to travel the world and I'm going to spread this message. And she'd like, you've gone mad. And then we actually considered at one point to maybe just sell our house and just get a little apartment, and because I thought I've got to do this. And but it just got to a point where like it was getting to a point where it was getting that I couldn't say no. I'd get calls for camps, I'd go, I'd leave my business, and I just couldn't help doing what I was doing. But I worked very hard for 10 years, established the business, and you know, did a lot of graft. And then one day, and one of my cousins, that same cousin that took us to the Gurdwara 15 years back, he turned up again. He said, "This knowledge that you're accumulating," he goes, "you've got to spread it." He goes, "You've got to get it out there." I'm like, "How?" He's like, "What about this new guy that's come about on YouTube, Jagrad Singh, who started off this Basics of Sikhi channel? Why don't you contact him? Maybe he can take you on." I'm like, yeah. But I was very kind of laid back, and I would never initiate something. So we would sit down and have dreams, and like, you know, daydream. And we'd sit down. I would say, "Imagine if I could do Parchar full time, and financially, you wouldn't have to worry about it because it'd be covered." And I'd say, "Look, come on, guys, don't say that because it's never going to happen. There's no way of that happening. So like, why even saying something that it's too painful to even talk about it because it's just a dream." But anyway, I didn't contact Jagrad Singh. Call it my pride, call it whatever. But yeah, I didn't. And then I think he'd probably been doing it for about 6 months then. And then I was called up to do some gatha in Aberdeen, which is like 8 hours away from where we live. I went. We had our first child then. He was probably about a year old, and we've gone up there. On the Bog Day of the Smagam, this has been now, it's gone live out. It's everybody can watch this like all over Europe and everything by Seat Channel. And I was talking about a very emotional topic, and I was talking about Bhai Mati Das Ji's Shahidi, but in a lot of detail, and speaking about Guru Gobind Singh Ji on the night before the Chamkaur battle, and how they were giving love to the Singhs. And there was a lot of Sangat that was sitting there, very emotional, very tearful. And Jagrad Singh is sitting like 500 miles away in London and doesn't very often watch the Seat channels because he doesn't get time because he was so busy in Parchar. And he's just come back from a Canada tour, very ill, editing videos because he was the only one in Basic Sikhi at that point. And now there's 10 employees with Maharaj Kirpa, but he's the only one then. For some reason, he just thought, let me just flick over and I need a break. But for some reason, he typed in Seat channel, which is very odd, which you would never do. And it was that point where I was live doing Katha on the Seat channel. And it was that very moment, a very emotional part of the Katha. And straight away, he's got onto Facebook and he's put a message out to say, does anybody know who this Singh is? And then a few people have seen the message and they've messaged him back, and eventually he's inboxed me on Facebook, and we got to speak on the same day. And he's just a Singh that is so determined and is so focused, and he's one Singh that I've seen that has got so much pain for the Panth and just wants to get Guru Nanak's message out there. He just said to me, "Look, why don't you come on board?" And he said, he goes, we haven't got the money at the moment. He goes, but we're going to do this. And I said, again, my pride kicked in. No, I'm not going to give up my business. You give me talks, I'll take them on as well. I can do this. I can do it all. So, and he's like, he goes, we're going to get you on board. He goes, you can't run now. And that, he was just so confident. And that was it. He didn't let go. And he bought me a whole load of equipment, bought a camera, bought a Mac to say, yeah, well, he goes, it doesn't work like this for us. If you do any talks for us, you've got to edit it. It's got to go up on the channel. I'm like, I'll do it all. I'm not giving up my day job. And it became impossible to do everything eventually. Starting getting so busy. And then I remember he called me up. What did it for me in the end was when he called me up to London to do a katha on the stage on Park Avenue Gurdwara in Singh Sabha, where he had been doing katha there. He was on Savaiye then, and it was on Saaj Ko Sun Leho Sobe Jin Prem Kiyo Tinhi Prapayo. And he said, look, he goes, why don't you take 20 minutes of my slot? And I said, look, I don't want to interfere in your katha, I go, but I'll just speak of that one pankti for 20 minutes. And what did it for me was, he was the first kathakar that when I did katha in with Maharaji's presence and then him sitting next to me, a lot of the time when somebody new comes forward, and I've seen sometimes the faces of other parcharaks, other kathakars, you can sense that jealousy, you can sense that bitter feeling, uncomfortable feeling. And I've been I've done katha and I've seen like a very uncomfortable feeling amongst people. But Jagrad Singh was the total opposite. And he really just gave that stage and didn't feel like somebody's taking my seat. And when I started katha, and I just remember glimpsing at his face, the happiness, the smile he had on his face. He had tears rolling down his face, and he was so into the katha. And just his response, and I thought, Maharaj, this is the right move. And he probably doesn't even know this until today. I've probably not told him. Like, it was his response and how his face and his aura, that I just knew this was the right thing to do. Many people were trying to stop me from doing this full time, but something just felt right. And when he came on afterwards, he was so humbling to hear what he said on stage. And I'm not worthy of this comment, but I'm just going to quote what he said. But that's what made me fall for the whole thing. He said to the Sangat, he came on, he was still very emotional because it was an emotional katha. And he said, he goes, Sangat ji, he goes, I told you, there's better people out there than me. And not that I wanted the praise, but his humbleness in his speech. And then straight after that, he announced in the presence of Guru Granth Sahib Ji that Baljeet Singh will now be joining us full time. I was like, okay. And it was Ma's kirpa, and that was it. And the blessings that Maharaji has showered since then can't even be spoke about. When we go and meet Sangat, and when you hear their lives being changing out there, not because of the katha I'm doing, because they're getting to hear the Guru's lives in a language they can understand. And for me, anyone that can listen to the Guru's lives, it can't be that it won't change their life. If we can get the Guru's message out there, it can't be that it won't touch people. So when I remember meeting a lady in her late 40s, and she just said, she goes, thank you, Paji. And I said, Panji, for what? And she goes, the Katha series of 12 weeks, 12 Gurus, when you go through all the Gurus. And she said, my husband stopped drinking. And she goes, our house has become like from hell to heaven. And she said, and I said, thank the Guru, because I spoke about the Guru. The Gurus inspired him. And when you hear that and the blessing, it's just immense. And Ma's kirpa that they keep us going. And to spread Guru's message. And the biggest thing is that our focus remains on the Shabad. That Parchar ji says, Langar challe Gur Shabad har tot na avi khattiye. Maharaj says that this will never run out, but as long as the food for us is the Shabad, and our focus doesn't go into anything else other than the Shabad.